Hey everybody, it's Laura with Jot and Tittle Vintage Typewriters, and I am going to do an instructional video for you today. We're going to take a look at a 1945 Smith Corona Sterling. This is the 4A series, and I believe this is the first year, and I could be wrong, but it's if it's not the first year, it's a very early year model of the 4A series. And these have the black, they're like a smooth key. It looks like they just put something over the metal key, but it's black and smooth. It doesn't have the raised ridges around the edges, kind of like the glass keys did. And I really like it. I just love how each model has something a little bit different on the typewriters, and different colored keys and shapes. And so this is the round black keys, the original ones, and you can, on this one, you can see kind of the original, or the authentic yellowing. You don't have to do anything special to make it look vintage. The keys are in excellent conditions, but some of the keys have yellowed. This one has a floating shift. And if you're not familiar with typewriters yet, which is why I do these videos, because a lot of you are gifted them, or you find them in sheds or garages or attics, and they're family heirlooms, and you're probably on here trying to learn how to use them. So this is the carriage here on your typewriter, and if you open it up, this is the escapement area, the typing basket, and the floating shift. What that does is it moves this basket, whereas some other models and the older models, when you would shift, it would move the carriage. So the carriage would go up and down. It was like, and you could feel the weight. Obviously, there's leverage from the key, but the key was lifting the carriage, and so your pinky would get tired. And so the floating shift was much less stress on the pinky for the typer. So that's what that is. But I'm going to go through from the beginning. We're going to look at this whole thing. I'm going to do a little bit of typing on it, not a lot, so you can hear it. But before I do that, before I forget, here is a typing demo sheet that I did, and you can see that on this particular typewriter, it has a skip along the carriage in the exact same spot. So that is something that is an issue with this particular typewriter. Not all typewriters do that. Sometimes typewriters will skip at random places. This typewriter has its one spot where it likes to jump a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and start. This metal piece, this back plate, actually folds over, and you'll be able to see here's margins. And I'm going to lift this up, and this is where you set your margins, and that is where you set your tab. These are tab keys. They're right here, and I'm going to put this back. And you saw where those were, and so those keys, they're a little stiff. They come out, and that back area has grooves within that metal bar that goes across, and then you just slit this key. Originally there are 6 keys, and by the time you get it, it's not common for them to be missing a few of the keys. So it's actually more uncommon for a typewriter to have all 6, but then you just would slide this within one of the grooves back here, and that is how you set your tabs. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one does have all 6. That's awesome. Okay, then this right here is where you set your margins, and you just press on top, and then you drag it to where you want it. And I always do really narrow margins just for my typing demos, because I like to show backspaces and margin releases. So I just keep my margins narrow only for the typing demos. Some people ask me about that. When I do regular typing, I have I like the wider margins for my paper. Okay, so then I just lifted up the paper holder, and it just keeps your paper from flopping over. It's actually very handy as you get towards the bottom of your paper where you're typing. That paper will fold way over, and this keeps it kind of upright and doesn't pull on the paper as much. So then you can just fold those down. This is a paper guide. And so for example, this paper you can see is a half sheet. And so you just kind of put your paper guide, and that just helps you load it straight. And it also, if you're using multiple pages, it really helps you make sure that your margins are in the same spot, because you can set your margins, but if you don't use your paper guide, you could load your paper in different places. Like I could move it over here, or I could move it over here, but that paper guide, so I have it set to 1. And if I do a second page, I'll set it in the exact same spot. And then that way the margin is in the exact same spot for if I'm doing a multiple page project. And that's where that comes in handy. So I'll move that back out. Over here is you can bring these in if you want. I personally usually pull those out to the side, but that just kind of helps keep your paper taut against the roller here, which is also called the platen. Sometimes, I mean, it's just personal preference. You may like that, you may not. I find that I prefer to pull them out to the side and not use them. So right here is the paper release. And that is so that when you load your paper, if you happen to load it crooked, so you can see my paper is crooked, you just pull that forward, line up your paper so it's even, excuse me, and then make sure you re-engage that paper release. Okay, so here, I think this is what this does, is releases the platen, this platen out of the carriage area. I don't use that. That is probably more for people who are doing deep cleaning and repairs. My husband does all of that. Your carriage release is back here. There's a lever on both sides. It doesn't matter which one you use. You just pull that in. Your carriage is automatically going to pull to the left because there's a drawband with tension on it, and so it's going to pull to the left. But you can push it either way. The carriage will move only as far as you have the margins set. So because I have a narrow margin set, it's only going to stay within this narrow margin. But if I pull those margins out, the carriage will go further out. Now, when you come close to the right margin, you're going to hear the bell, and this one's a very sweet bell, and that's to tell you that, hey, you are at the end of your line. You need to hit your return handle, go back to the beginning, and then that will also advance a line, or it could advance 2 lines depending on how you have it set, and that's what this little knob right here is for. And can you see that? I'm going to pull that up. Sometimes that's hard to see. It's the one that's sticking up. And that's 1 or 2. That's the line. And I think there's only the 2 settings on that one. And that's what that is for. Now, if you can feel, take your hand on your typewriter and you will feel that there is a knob right in the middle of that. And if you pull it out, there isn't one here. There's just a bump here. There's not a knob. If you pull that out, that is for like variable spacing. It releases the platen, it disengages it so that you can kind of line things up easier, because sometimes it's like, especially if you're using like lined paper, or if you took your paper out and you're putting it back in and you want it to line up perfectly, this is what you use this for. And then you just press that back in, make sure it snaps in place. And you can hear that clicking. That is clicking every half of a line. Okay. I am going to move the carriage over to the left so that it won't scratch my top. And we're going to open this up and look at the spools. So you just grab it right here, pull, and inside you'll see your typing basket. Here is your tension selector. This just determines how hard these type bars strike the paper. You've got 2 ways to adjust the tension. One is your hand. And like my husband has a very heavy hand when he types, and I have a very light hand. So we would want different tension selectors. And you can just, again, adjust this to your preference. Most of the time, I don't notice much of a difference, but some people do. And you just press it out. This one's a little stiff, but that's what you do on that one. Here's the spool. It's a universal spool on this one, and we've put fresh ribbon. We do that for all of our typewriters. So if you need a new spool and ribbon, you can go to our website at jotandtittletypewriters.com. The link is below, and we have where you can purchase spools for your typewriter. Now the black is on the top, and red is on the bottom. And then, you know, a lot of people wonder, how do you get it threaded properly? Each one is different. It's messy, so one, either wear gloves, or two, make sure you're not wearing anything you want to get stained. Keep a towel nearby. I have a close-up photo of this area to kind of help guide you in threading your ribbon. Now you have to kind of pay attention. Sometimes there's little slits in these metal pieces. Sometimes they're on the back side, back here. Sometimes they're underneath. Sometimes they're on the top. So you kind of have to just feel around and look at it. But firstly, make sure it goes through this guide wire and this one. And then I'm just going to hold it up close so you can kind of see that. And like I said, you can go to the product listing link below and find the up-close image and bookmark that. But just, you'll have to kind of jimmy that ribbon through the different slits you see in there until it looks like this. I personally don't enjoy threading ribbon. I'm not going to lie, it's not always easy. And you may have to try it a couple different times. But one thing I will say is when you do thread it through, the ribbon needs to go up on the top and around. Same with this side, up and around. Okay, so that's actually very, very important. Also, when you get to the end of your ribbon on a spool, it's not the end of the ink. This will last you a really long time. And so you'll need to reverse the direction of your ribbon, and you do that right here. This is the manual reverse, and you just click, and that reverses the direction, and you can go this way now, and you'll go back and forth multiple times before you need to change your ribbon. Let me add a note here that sometimes ribbons have a grommet at the end of them, and it will auto reverse. Ours do not have grommets, so when you do purchase a ribbon, just check to see if it comes with a grommet or not. Grommet auto reverses. Those without grommets don't auto reverse, so be aware of that. It doesn't have to do with the typewriter, it has to do with the ribbon. Okay, so we're going to close this, and oh, by the way, if you want to know where your serial number is, it's right here. It's stamped on the metal frame. And then you can go to typewriterdatabase.com, look up your serial number, and find out when it was manufactured. All right, so back down here, we've got our keys. I showed you the floating shift earlier. Here's your shift lock. To release the shift lock, either one of these bigger ones, you just hit, and that'll release it. You have a backspace. Right here, backspace does not erase, but when you make a mistake, because you will, you can backspace and like X through it or put a line through it, whatever you like to do to handle that. This is your color selector. It has a blue dot on the top, but that's for the black ribbon. You've got a white dot, which is for a stencil. You won't use that, and if your setting is on the stencil setting, it's not going to type properly. And then the red dot is for your red ribbon. Obviously, you can use any color ribbon you want, any two-color ribbon. Just keep in mind that the blue dot is for the top color and the red dot is for the bottom color. I showed you where to set your tabs in the back, and this is your tabs. And then let's look at the margin. So you heard the bell, and now my carriage has stopped because it's like, hey, you told me this is your margin. But I want to finish a thought. So I'm going to hit margin release. You saw it jump a little bit, so it released that margin. and then I can finish my word or thought and go to the next line. That's what the margin release is for. Now, if you're using your margin release on every single line, you've missed the point of margin release and margins. You need to stay within your margins. That margin release is every once in a while, it's not going to fit right, or you miss something. And this is for the occasional use. You need to adjust your margins to so that you can fit within those margins for the best look. And anyway, that's the purpose of it. And smooth writing, you know, you don't want to stop on every line and hit margin release. That takes time. Okay, so that is the Smith Corona 4A Series 1945 model, and I hope you found this helpful. Ask any questions below. I only check my comments every couple of weeks, so thank you for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed this, and happy typing.